So, when you hear the title, The Art of War, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably brutal battles, right? Cunning deception, a playbook for absolute domination? Well, today we're going to crack open one of history's most famous books and find something surprising. Its biggest lesson isn't actually about how to fight. It's about how to win without ever fighting at all.
And look, it's a fair question. This thing was written 2,500 years ago in ancient China. We're talking bronze weapons and chariot warfare. So how is it still so incredibly relevant? Well, here's the secret. This book isn't really about war, not in the way we think about it. It's about strategy, it's about psychology, and it's about the very nature of conflict itself.
And you know what? Once you start looking, you see its fingerprints everywhere. Just think about the words we use every single day. In business, we launch marketing campaigns to capture market share. In politics, it's all about strategic maneuvering and outflanking your opponent. Even the office can feel like a battlefield for promotions sometimes. This whole mindset of seeing competition as a strategic game, a lot of that way of thinking traces right back to this ancient text.
So, who was the brilliant mind behind all these ideas? Well, the book is largely credited to a general named Sun Mu. He lived during a really chaotic time in China called the Spring and Autumn period, about 2,500 years ago. He was a master strategist for sure, but he needed to prove his theories actually worked. And the story of how he did that, well, it is absolutely legendary.
You see, the local king was intrigued by Sun Mu's reputation, but he was also pretty skeptical. So he gave him what sounds like an impossible, almost ridiculous task. Take 100 of his palace concubines, women who had zero military training, and turn them into a disciplined, effective fighting unit. And Sun Mu, he just accepted the challenge. Okay, so here's how it went down. Sun Mu lines them up and explains the drum commands. He gives the order and the women just laugh. They think it's a joke. So he repeats the order, and this time he says, you know what, if the commands aren't clear, that's my fault as the general. They laugh again. But then he says, okay, but if the orders are clear and you still don't follow them, then the fault lies with your commanders. And in a move that shocked everyone, he had their two appointed leaders, who just happened to be the king's two favorite concubines, executed on the spot. Suddenly, nobody was laughing. From that moment on, they followed every single command perfectly. He proved his point in the most brutal way possible. Strategy is useless without absolute discipline.
Now, the legacy of this strategic genius didn't stop with Sun Mu. It was passed down to his descendant, a man named Sun Bin. And honestly, Sun Bin's own life is maybe the perfect real-world example of the art of war's main idea, that real power comes from your mind, from your strategy, not just brute force.
So Sun Bin studied strategy with another guy named Peng Zhuan. The problem was, Peng Zhuan knew Sun Bin was way more talented, and he was consumed by jealousy. So after Peng Zhuan got a job as a general, he tricked Sun Bin into coming to his state, framed him for a crime, and had him sentenced to a horrific punishment. His kneecaps were removed, crippling him for life. Peng Zhuan thought he had broken him, but he was wrong. Sun Bin pretended to go insane, scribbling on walls and acting like a madman until he finally managed a daring escape to a rival kingdom, and that's where he got his chance for revenge.
And his brilliance is just perfectly captured in this famous horse racing story. So his new boss loved to race horses against the king, but he always lost. It was a simple best out of 3 setup. You have a good horse, a medium horse, and a weaker one. The standard thinking was to match your best against their best, your mid against their mid, and so on. Sun Bin's advice was totally different. He said, listen, put your worst horse against their best. You're going to lose that one, for sure. But then, use your best horse against their middle horse, and your middle horse against their worst. And just like that, you lose one race on purpose to guarantee you win the other 2. It's a simple, brilliant shift in perspective that turns certain defeat into a guaranteed win.
He applied this exact same logic to the battlefield. Later, when his old rival Peng Zhuan laid siege to an allied state, everyone else wanted to just send an army straight into the fight. That's the obvious move, right? But Sun Bin saw a much smarter path. Why would you want to have a costly head-on collision with a strong, prepared army? He realized Peng Zhuan's own capital city was now barely defended. So he said, let's attack them where they're weak. This forced Peng Zhuan to abandon his siege and race his exhausted army all the way back home, right into an ambush Sun Bin had waiting for them. He saved his allies without ever fighting that big direct battle.
So you see where this is all going, right? The brutal test of discipline, the horse race, the rescue of Xiao, all of these stories are pointing to one central and honestly often misunderstood idea at the heart of the art of war. It's not a book that celebrates fighting. It's a guide on how to avoid it whenever possible.
And there it is. That's the line. This is probably the single most important sentence in the entire book. The ultimate victory isn't the one you win on a bloody battlefield. The supreme, most elegant victory is the one you achieve before a single weapon is even drawn. It's winning through superior strategy, better positioning, and psychological dominance.
So here's the key takeaway. The art of war completely redefines what it means to win. Winning isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about achieving your objective. And the true master, the best leader, achieves their goals so smoothly and with so little friction that the opponent is defeated without a destructive fight ever taking place.
So no, this isn't some manual that glorifies war. Actually, the book starts with a very serious warning. War is a matter of life and death, and it should always be the absolute last resort. The real lessons here are about preparation. They're about knowing your enemy, but even more importantly, knowing yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses. The real victory is the one that's planned and won long before the battle ever starts.
So, let's bring it all home. Why are we still talking about this book? Why have specific battlefield tactics changed a million times, but generals, CEOs, and political strategists are all still reading this today?
It's because this is a book of principles, not a book of rules. It's not telling you exactly what to do in every situation. Instead, it teaches you how to think. It dives deep into the fundamentals, things like preparation, deception, momentum, psychology. And those are elements of conflict that are just as real in a boardroom negotiation as they were on an ancient battlefield. It gives you a framework for thinking, for navigating any competitive situation with wisdom and efficiency.
And that really brings us to the final, most important question the book leaves us with. It's a challenge, really, to look at the conflicts in our own lives, in our careers, our projects, whatever it is, and to ask a fundamentally different question. Not, how can I win this fight? But instead, how can I be so strategic, so prepared, that I achieve my goal without the fight ever needing to happen in the first place?
So when you hear the title, The Art of War, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably crushing your competition, right? Winning these huge, decisive battles. For centuries, that's exactly how it's been sold, as the ultimate playbook for generals and, modern-day CEOs. But here's the thing. The book's biggest secret is that this entire understanding is, completely wrong. Right there, that single sentence is the whole secret. Sun Tzu's ultimate goal wasn't to teach you how to fight better, it was to teach you how to win so effectively that you never even have to fight in the first place.
I mean, how can you possibly defeat an opponent without ever clashing on the battlefield? It sounds like a total paradox, doesn't it? But for Sun Tzu, it was actually the only truly logical way to approach any conflict.
And this idea, win without fighting, this wasn't just some clever little saying for him. Nope. It was the absolute foundation of his entire philosophy, and it was built on a really pragmatic, clear-eyed understanding of what war actually is. Just think about it for a second. A real war, even a war you win, is absolutely devastating. It empties the treasury, it eats up resources, and it costs a staggering number of lives. Sometimes the price of winning is so high it might as well be a defeat. Sun Tzu got it 2,500 years ago. The smartest victory is the one that costs you absolutely nothing. So the question remains, how is that kind of victory even possible? Well, while other commanders were totally focused on swords and shields and chariots, Sun Tzu argued that the most powerful weapon in any conflict isn't a weapon at all, it's information. And the absolute best way to get that information is through the careful and strategic use of spies.
In the final, and honestly the most important chapter of The Art of War, he lays out this whole concept of Yong-Gone. He basically argued that while a big battle can drain a nation's entire wealth in a single day, a smart investment in high-quality human intelligence, that pays for itself 1,000 times over. It's the most logical, the most economical, and the most effective path to winning before the first arrow is even fired.
Now, not all spycraft is created equal. Historically, you can kind of see two major philosophies emerge. On one hand, you've got the British and Israeli model. Here, espionage is seen as this patriotic duty, an act of honor that's performed by the nation's best and brightest. Think James Bond or the agents of Mossad.
But then, on the other hand, there's the American model, which tends to be way more transactional. It basically operates on the principle that the most useful intelligence is often for sale, and that at the end of the day, money is the most reliable motivator.
And to really get a grip on the immense power of Sun Tzu's approach, we don't even need a hypothetical. We can look at one of the most incredible, jaw-dropping true stories of the 20th century, which shows just how much of an impact one single, well-placed spy can have.
Okay, so this is Richard Sorg. He was a Soviet spy, but he was posing as a die-hard Nazi journalist over in Tokyo. And he was good. He gained the complete trust of the German embassy and even top Japanese officials. In 1941, he gets his hands on the single most important piece of intelligence of the entire war. Japan was planning to attack the United States at Pearl Harbor, which meant they would not be invading the Soviet Union from the east. This let Stalin confidently move 30 battle-hardened Siberian divisions, we're talking nearly 500,000 soldiers, away from the Japanese border and send them west to defend Moscow, just as the German army was right at the city gates. That move, it saved the city and, you could argue, turned the entire tide of the war on the Eastern Front.
I mean, just let that sink in. The knowledge from one man, a single spy, achieved what a massive, bloody battle never could have, all without the catastrophic cost in lives and resources. It is the perfect, large-scale example of Sun Tzu's principle in action, subduing the enemy without fighting.
It's a fascinating piece of world history for sure. But what does any of this have to do with our daily lives, right? We aren't commanders of armies or international spies. But it turns out Sun Tzu's core wisdom is surprisingly universal.
This is probably the most famous line from the entire book, and it's the absolute key to applying these big ideas on a personal level. See, a conflict doesn't have to be a war between nations. It can be a disagreement at work, a tough negotiation, or even just a simple argument at home. Let's use a super simple, relatable example. Okay, first, know yourself. It's been a long day, you're exhausted, and all you want is a quiet night. Second, know your enemy, in this case your spouse. You can just tell they're worried about something, and you feel like a conflict might be brewing. So instead of bracing for impact and waiting for the battle to start, you launch a preemptive strike of empathy. You just address their concern first, calmly and directly, and what's the result? The potential conflict just dissolves before it even begins. You've won. You've achieved your objective, a peaceful evening without a fight.
And that, right there, is the greatest secret of the art of war. It's not a manual for how to dominate people. It's a guide to wisdom. It teaches that real power, true strength, isn't in your ability to win a fight. It's in your intelligence and your foresight to make that fight completely unnecessary in the first place. So I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. Think about it. Whether it's with a coworker, a family member, or maybe even just an internal struggle you're having. What battle could you win this week? Not by using force, but by using knowledge, strategy, and just a bit of understanding.